Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. The EFF leader Julius Malema says the party's national shutdown was a success. Malema and his supporters held a relatively peaceful protest against load shedding and for President Cyril Ramaphosa to step down. This is despite prior fears that the shutdown might turn violent. Now, joining us now is EFF Gauteng leader Nkululeko Dunga. Very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. South Africans have had mixed views about the national shutdown. Some believe it was a complete waste of time because ultimately it won't lead to President Cyril Ramaphosa's resignation. What do you think?
Well, good afternoon to you and good afternoon to the viewers of the news channel. Look, in the main sense, the EFF has taken a lot of time in terms of the preparation and the articulation of the national shutdown and the objective thereof. It's a protest. We're engaging in a peaceful protest throughout the country and particularly in Gauteng as a way of highlighting the plight that we're all confronted with. So by mere virtue that there's a society that is whether thinking that it was effective or ineffective, we have actually met our objective in terms of highlighting the core issues in South Africa, which in the main are encompassed in particularly two matters: for Cyril Ramaphosa to step down as a president and for load shedding to end. Throughout the entire weekend, particularly from Sunday up until today, when the national shutdown program of the EFF has already unfolded, we now see that load shedding is being reintroduced back again into the system of Eskom in itself. Now, that tells us that we actually had an extremely successful weekend and a build-up towards the national shutdown, to a sense that even Eskom in itself and government actually resolved not to even have load shedding, which was one of the fundamental bases of the call for national shutdown. But obviously, people can have their own opinion and their own views. We are to the firm belief that it was a success in itself.
Now, with only a few thousand people countrywide coming out to actively support your National Day of Protest, besides the fact that most areas had full electricity on the day of the shutdown, what do you think were some of your other successes?
Well, that's not true. The national shutdown in itself does not mean that we are going to go through each and every single shop and ensure that we remove people out of the shop. There was a call for the shutdown, in actual fact, by the Commander-in-Chief to actually take place even before the day of the 20th of March. Our people responded positively, as hence they stayed away and they did not go to work. Our people responded positively, including some of the government structures and most of these companies. You saw no trucks on the freeways. You saw virtually no cars on the freeways. All central business districts were actually closed. All the malls were shut down, and that was what the EFF had called for. Then the EFF participated in protests on our roads and everywhere else throughout our townships and suburban areas to highlight the plight. So, by no doubt, this was an extremely successful protest action of the EFF that was supported. I mean, if you look at your images throughout the entire day, you saw the masses in Sandton, you saw the masses in KZN, you saw the masses in the Western Cape, you saw the masses in Pretoria, you saw the masses in Nelson Mandela Bay. Over and above all the actions that took place in respective wards and in respective townships and suburban areas, it tells you that there was an active participation by everybody, including business, not to engage on any economic activity and therefore form part of the national shutdown of the EFF.
President Cyril Ramaphosa has also reacted to the shutdown, saying that it failed because the EFF is just not popular, also speaking about how it was a violation of people's rights because of the intimidation and all of that. But he's happy that the majority of South Africans exercised their right and didn't heed the call that your party was making.
Well, the exercise of right not to even go to work on the day is a vote of confidence in the protest movement of the EFF. So Cyril Ramaphosa is talking on something that he has little knowledge of. Those who can quantify in terms of the effect the national shutdown can genuinely have on the economy, and the economy that does not actually spiral down to the needy and the unemployment, have actually set it to as close as 26 billion in terms of the national quantification thereof. So it was extremely effective. Now, the aspect that the ANC and the media want to continue to narrate in terms of the unsuccessful aspect of the shutdown was that it was not chaotic. There was no burning of buildings and state facilities. There was no chaos. There was no killing. And there was no disruption and looting. And the EFF has continuously said that we are going to be engaged in peaceful protests throughout the entire country, and we have reached that objective that we sought to have achieved. And anything outside of that is a narrative that those who are extremely pained by the effectiveness of this campaign want to now narrate a different picture of what they determine as what should constitute a national shutdown. Cyril Ramaphosa is part of a political organization. If he wants to assume and come to the position that a national shutdown or a shutdown at any level is consistent with looting, disruption, and chaos, let him marshal his own political organization and actually do that. That's not what the EFF stands for.
Your Commander-in-Chief, Julius Malema, labeled the deployment of the SANDF as a bid by Ramaphosa to crush the calls for his resignation. In fact, he likened the deployment of the army to a return of a state of emergency during apartheid. Do you think, had the army presence not been there and all the other law enforcement officials, that it could have been bigger than what we saw yesterday?
Well, the core principle and one of the cardinal pillars of the EFF is open, accountable, free society. That is free from victimization of state forces and security. And, we are of the firm belief that the introduction of the South African National Defense Force at a cost of almost 166 million in terms of its operational costs is unwarranted, it's unnecessary, and it seeks to stifle protests and an alternative voice that people might want to come up with. And yes, it smacks of someone with dictatorship tendencies who wants to suppress the views of the opposition. And this is no different to what the apartheid government did. This is no different to what many of the counter-revolutionary pseudo-democratic states do, where they use state forces to actually enforce not just what they would define as the rule of law, but an alternative view or a view of opposition. It was extremely unnecessary because the EFF had made it very clear that we are engaging in peaceful protests throughout the entire country. There is no report that they would have tabled that would have come before the Commander-in-Chief of the National Defense Force that would have spoken of anything outside of a peaceful protest, when the real Commander-in-Chief, Julius Malema, stated on numerous occasions throughout all our platforms and in media platforms that the EFF engaged in a peaceful protest.
Yeah. Are you hoping that this shutdown gives room for other uprisings to take place, even as, are you hoping for more, that this is perhaps just the beginning?
We are hoping for an elevation of any challenges that are faced in society, whether it being in South Africa, whether it being in Africa, and throughout the entire world. That is, we are too inspired by many of uprisings that have taken place throughout the entire world. You know, the expression of the EFF as a protest movement is on the basis of uprisings against against the challenges that are faced by majority of the people who are in destitute throughout the entire world and the continent. And we hope that this too will inspire many of the African states and throughout the entire world to genuinely force accountability and enforce a view of the opposition to be heard in the political landscape throughout their respective countries.
And looking at elections 2024, how much of an impact do you think this shutdown will have going forward? I mean, are you able to measure its impact yet?
The EFF runs its programs with the view that they are in line with the interest of society. And this is no different. Cyril Ramaphosa is a money launderer who broke his oath of office. He's a part-time president. We ought to highlight that to society. And equally say to society that it was not society that actually voted for Cyril Ramaphosa. It was Parliament. Society voted for a representation into Parliament. And therefore, for Ramaphosa to step down would not be a defiance against the views of the electorate. The electorate voted a composition of Parliament. It was Parliament who voted for Cyril Ramaphosa. And any sustenance of someone who has broken his oath of office ought to be highlighted. And we are going to do exactly that with Cyril Ramaphosa, no matter who likes him and to what extent he is loved. We did that with the former president, Jacob Zuma. Cyril Ramaphosa is no different. We do that throughout all municipalities where we feel that mayors and speakers have gone against their oath of office and are doing things that are inconsistent with the constitution and the law and basic principles, where we move for their resignation, where we call for them to actually be removed. So Cyril should be no different, more especially when he has broken his oath of office. And that's what we needed to highlight to society. So it matters not as to whether elections were next year or 10 years down the line. It's the principle that must continuously unfold. We're yet to see the effect, but consistently, scientifically, we're reminded that the EFF is growing, and it's growing extremely well throughout. And there's a stable organization that is actually functioning. And that's what matters to society. What matters to us as the EFF is that the EFF exists to advance the agenda of those who are marginalized. And that's what we do on a day-to-day basis. And people have just in December, we actually met our one...
We're going to have to leave it there for now. I hate to cut you off. Nkululeko Dunga, EFF Gauteng leader, talking and, of course, reacting to the outcome of yesterday's national shutdown.